Do you know what does my head in? Couples who cannot hear each other. And I don't mean hearing impaired. I mean selectively deaf when it suits them. I see it every single week in life, in the supermarket, in therapy. So one person says one thing, the other hears another. Somebody says something simple and the other individual twists it into an attack. And suddenly it's World War III over something very small like school runs, feeding the pets. And here's the kicker, it's fixable. If couples actually fix this one thing, if they learn to listen properly instead of mishearing, misreading, and assuming the worst, half of them wouldn't need me or any therapist. Basically out of a job, if people sort this. But do they sort it? No. So many people come to therapy week after week ready to re-litigate the same fight because nobody's actually listening to what's been said. It's like this. You think your partner is insulting you, dismissing you, or plotting your emotional demise when all they actually said was, "Did you buy milk?" And the partner goes off on a 10-minute tirade about how they're not appreciated. Meanwhile, they're sitting there thinking, "I just wanted tea or coffee the next morning." So this is what I mean when I say couples don't break up because of sex, money, or in-laws. They break up because of the Chinese whispers going on inside their own heads. They're not fighting each other, they're fighting their projections, their childhood wounds, their fear scripts. And I'm sure they look at me and other therapists as if we're going to wave magic wands. Unfortunately, nobody has one of those. And here's the truth. If you stop mishearing each other, if you gave each other the benefit of the doubt, if you checked instead of assumed, you'd take 70% of the tension right out of your relationship. That's not me being generous, that's research. Just go and read everything that the Gottmans have ever written. But honestly, you don't need any kind of couple therapist to teach you this. You need a pause button and the humility to admit that you might not always be right about what your partner meant. So today, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to talk about how mishearing, mind reading, projecting, and tone twisting will absolutely destroy your love life faster than any affair ever could. And how, if you get this right, you can save yourself absolutely years of resentment, disconnection, and unnecessary therapy bills. So here's the bottom line. You don't need better arguments, you need better hearing. Here's the thing nobody tells you about relationships. They don't usually collapse in one catastrophic bang. Most of the time, it's what I call death by 1,000 paper cuts. These tiny repeated moments of not being heard, of being misunderstood, of being misread, misjudged, until you don't feel safe in your own house anymore. And it doesn't start with a betrayal or a screaming match or somebody running off with the neighbour. It starts with the small, quiet rot. "That's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. Why do you always assume the worst?" And after a while, the rot sets in so deep that everything sounds like criticism, even the most neutral of comments. And here is why this matters. So when you feel misunderstood by the person you love the most, it cuts deeper than anything else. You can shrug off being misheard in the office. You can ignore the passive-aggressive WhatsApp group chat. When the person you share a bed with consistently gets you wrong, when they assume, project, misinterpret, it doesn't just sting, it erodes trust. And when trust goes, connection follows. I see this all the time. So when a couple sits down, within 5 minutes they're already at war, not because of what was said, but because of what they thought they heard. They're fighting ghosts. Ghosts of tone, ghosts of imagined intent, ghosts of childhood echoes. And then they wonder why they're exhausted, why they feel miles apart, even though they're sitting literally 2 feet away from each other. And that's the tragedy of it, because all of this is fixable. If you repair the way you listen, if you clean up the static, the entire relationship will feel different. Suddenly you don't have to second guess each other. Suddenly your nervous system relaxes because you're not on permanent defense. And guess what? When your nervous system calms down, desire comes back, affection comes back, safety comes back. But if you don't fix this, if you keep letting misinterpretations run the show, the whole foundation will begin to crack. You end up sleeping beside someone who feels like a stranger, or worse still, going into the guest room. Not because they changed, but because the version of them in your head has been distorted by years of mishearing. So let me say it plainly. Your love will not survive without clarity. You can have all the chemistry, all the sex, all the holidays, shared playlists, whatever. But if you don't know how to hear each other correctly, your relationship is on a slow drip to nowhere. And why does this matter? Because love isn't destroyed by lack of passion, it's destroyed by lack of precision in the way that people listen. So let's call it out. When couples come into therapy, they think the problem is money, parenting, sex, in-laws. It's not. The actual problem is that they stopped hearing each other correctly. They've built a house of straw on the swamp of miscommunication. And the swamp creatures, they've got names. I'm going to walk through them. So we've got mind reading. This is the Olympic sport of couples. You don't even give your partner the courtesy of finishing their sentence before you've decided what they mean. And you're always convinced you're right. You said you were tired. What you meant is you don't want to spend time with me. No, actually, what they meant is that they're tired. Shocking, I know. And then we've got projection. So this is when you take your own feelings, fears, or motives and staple them onto your partner. You're feeling insecure, so you decide they must be criticizing you. You're feeling guilty, so you accuse them of being judgmental. You're the one carrying the baggage, but somehow it's always placed in their hand. Then we've got the assumptions. The brain loves shortcuts, but in love, shortcuts are truly deadly. So you assume they know what you meant. You assume you know what they meant. You assume intent without evidence. This is the relationship equivalent of filling in a crossword with all the wrong words and then wondering why nothing lines up. And then we've got distorted listening. So this is where you're technically listening, except you're not. You're preparing your counterattack. You're loading the gun while they're mid-sentence, or worse, you deliberately mishear their tone, they say something neutral, and you decide that you're going to hear sarcasm dripping from every syllable. It's selective hearing, but with bad faith, and in severe cases, a bit of malice. And then we've got the non-verbal sabotage. The deadly sigh, the raised eyebrow, the pause. And instead of asking, hey, what's going on for you there? You go straight into, they hate me, they're annoyed, they're rejecting me. You assign meaning to gestures without checking if it's true. Sometimes a sigh is just a sigh. Sometimes they just had a couple of paninis for lunch and maybe they're repeating on them. So now, why do these matter? Because every single one of these erodes trust, not in a dramatic explosion, but in the quiet corrosion that makes you feel like you're living with an enemy instead of a partner. So you start keeping score. Oh, this one's great. And this is also dangerous. So you start defending instead of relating, and before you know it, the relationship feels like a courtroom instead of a home. Here's the truth bomb. Most couples aren't fighting over reality, they're fighting over the distortions of reality. They're not fighting what their partner said, they're fighting what they think their partner meant. And if you don't catch these distortions, they're going to calcify. They become the story you tell about who your partner is, and once the story is set, intimacy doesn't stand a chance. So, these are the core problems: mind reading, projection, assumptions, distorted listening, and non-verbal sabotage. So many different ways to miscommunicate. Until you tame them, every conversation is a potential battlefield. And here's where it gets really juicy. Because these listening problems aren't just about poor communication, If it were that simple, every couple could fix it with an active listening worksheet. You can get one of those on Pinterest. No, what actually happens is that when you're in conflict with your partner, you're just not hearing them. You're hearing your mother, your father, your ex, your critical teacher, the playground bully, every ghost from your past who left an imprint on how safe or unsafe it feels to be heard. That's what you're hearing. And that's why you can't just tell people listen better. Their nervous system won't allow it. When fear is activated, the ears shut down. You're not listening to your partner anymore. You're listening to your own inner alarm bells, and those alarms are deafening. Think about it. Your partner sighs and says, I'm tired, but your childhood memory hears, you're too much, you're a burden, don't bother me. Suddenly you're not responding to your partner. You're responding to your father on the sofa after work when you were 7 years of age. The past has hijacked the present. Or your partner raises an eyebrow and you snap. Not because an eyebrow is inherently offensive, but because your psyche has a file marked danger and it contains every moment of being shamed, ridiculed, or belittled. The eyebrow raise becomes a trigger. You're in a courtroom that doesn't exist, except in your nervous system, it feels like life or death. And that is why projection is so powerful in relationships. We don't argue with who's in front of us, we argue with the internal object we've pasted or put a mask over their face with. We argue with the ghost of the critical mother. We argue with the phantom of the cheating ex. And then we punish our partner for crimes they didn't commit. I'd really like to mention a book here that's brilliant at helping you see all of this. The Presence Process by Michael Brown. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant book. It's an interactive book. You have to practice a sequence of exercises throughout the book, and it's brilliant at clearing up rejection. So, clarification. It's not just a nice tool, it's an active repair. So when you stop and say, hold on, what I heard was this, is that right? You are literally interrupting the transference. You're saying, I'm not going to let my past dictate this moment. I'm going to actually hear you instead of fighting with my projections. That's not a communication trick, that's deep psychological work. So here's another kicker. This is why therapy helps. Because half the time I'm not translating what the partner says, I'm translating what their nervous system thought it heard. I'm the referee saying, no, she didn't call you lazy. She asked if you did X, Y, and Z. And you'd be amazed how quickly the atmosphere shifts once people realize they're not under attack. So yes, we can talk about active listening skills all day, but until you understand that mishearing is often your psyche dragging old ghosts into the room, you're going to keep misfiring. So psychodynamic truth here, your partner is rarely the enemy. It's usually your own projections. Let's bring this down to earth because theory is one thing, but where couples actually live is in the everyday, day-to-day life. And honestly, that's where most of the carnage happens. Not in the big moments, but in the tiny throwaway exchanges that should be absolutely nothing until they turn into something. Example 1. Did you feed the dog? Why are you saying I'm useless? That I can't be trusted with basic tasks like feeding Billy? No, they just wanted to know if Billy was fed. Has he eaten? We've gone from kibble to character assassination in 4 seconds flat. Then we've got the sigh. Partner A comes home, dumps their bag, plops themselves down in an armchair and gives a big sigh. Oh my God, what's wrong with you? You angry with me again? No, they're angry at the N4 traffic jam, not your existence. But because the sigh gets misread, we now have a row about tone instead of empathy for the commute. Then we've got the check-in. Hey, what time will you be home? Why are you so controlling? Jeez, I'm not a teenager. Again, all they wanted to know was if dinner should go in the oven at 4 o'clock or 6. It's logistics, not surveillance. And then the bedroom. I'm not in the mood tonight. So you don't find me attractive anymore? What was a simple statement of tiredness has turned into a whole narrative of rejection, abandonment, and sexual doom. And then the playful moment. Partner A cracks a joke when partner B is anxious. Now, if it's done to dismiss, sure, that's toxic. But if it's done to ground, to lighten, and to say, we're okay, that's actually safety. The difference is whether you mishear the intent. One way it's mockery, the other it's love in disguise. And here's the pattern. In every one of these examples, the actual words or actions are neutral. The explosion comes from the interpretation layered on top. Couples don't just mishear words, they mishear intent and they mishear tone. They mishear body language. And then they weaponize the mishearing as evidence. See, you're always criticizing me. You're always rejecting me. You're always controlling me. These absolute statements come out of people's mouths. But the truth is, half the time your partner is just living their life, breathing, sighing, asking questions, and making dinner plans. The tragedy is that ordinary moments of connection get hijacked by assumptions, projection, and, as I said, ghosts. What could have been nothing turns into another brick that you're cementing into the wall between you. And this is why I tell couples, don't dismiss the small stuff. The small stuff is the big stuff. If you can't navigate school runs, feeding the dog and the cat, the sigh, the check-in, the bedroom and the joke, your relationship won't survive the bigger storms. So yes, it's funny on one level, but on another it's deadly serious. Because if you mishear love enough times, eventually love stops speaking. Okay, let's get practical. Because if I leave you here, you'll just nod along and then go straight back to mishearing your partner before the kettle's even boiled. The good news? This part is fixable. These are not mystical, unattainable skills. They're everyday tools, and if you use them consistently, your relationship changes full stop. Tool 1, the clarification loop. This is a relationship version of measure twice, cut once. You simply repeat back what you think you heard. So you listen and say, so what I'm hearing is, insert whatever. So an example, that you're frustrated I was late, not that you hate my entire personality. Is that right? And here's the magic. 9 times out of 10, you'll discover you did hear it wrong. The loop interrupts distortion. It stops rejection in its tracks. Tool 2, benefit of the doubt, good faith. Your partner sighs. And instead of launching into you're annoyed at me, try, maybe they're just tired. Maybe they've had a long day. Maybe it's not about me. Then clarify. Go back to tool 1. Radical, I know. But when you practice giving the benefit of the doubt and acting in good faith, you build trust instead of suspicion. Relationships thrive when you assume love before you assume attack. Tool 3. Pause before reacting. Sounds simple, feels impossible. But that microsecond between stimulus and response, that's where freedom lives. Instead of snapping, try asking yourself, am I answering them or am I answering my projection? Back to Michael Brown's book, The Presence Process. So sometimes your fight is with your partner. Sometimes it's with your mother in 1989. Best to check before detonating. Tool 4. Repair after rupture. Even with all the tools in the world, you're going to mess up. You're going to mishear, misread, misfire. I do too. It's human. The power lies in repair. You know what? I completely misunderstood you back there. Can we rewind? Can we really choose something different? Those 2 sentences are absolutely worth their weight in gold. They say, I care more about getting it right than actually being right. And then we've got tool 5, active listening in practice. So let me be clear, this isn't just about nodding along like a bobblehead toy, planning your counterattack. It means putting down the phone, turning towards your partner, actually tuning in, listening with your whole body, eye contact, presence, patience. Sounds really basic, but it's rare. And when you do it, your partner feels that safety starts to rebuild. And here's the truth. None of this is glamorous. It's not a Netflix rom-com. It's not grand gestures. It's not a candlelit dinner. It's the unsexy daily habit of catching yourself before you distort, clarifying instead of assuming, repairing instead of stonewalling. But that's what makes love durable. Passion is wonderful, but precision keeps you together. So if you take anything from this, stop making your partner a mind-reading hostage. Start asking, start checking, start listening. These are not just tools, they're survival skills for love. Here's where I hand everything back to you. Because it's one thing to nod along while you're walking the dog or driving the car, thinking, oh God, that's us. We do that all the time. But awareness without action is just entertainment. The real shift happens when you stop and actually reflect. So here are some prompts to sit with, to journal with, to contemplate, or if you're brave, have a chat about with your partner. So where do I assume instead of asking? Be really honest. Do you finish your partner's sentences in your head? Do you think you know what they mean before they've said it? Write down the last 3 arguments you had and circle how many were about assumptions rather than facts. Then, do I give my partner the benefit of the doubt? Do I act in good faith? Or do you immediately interpret their sigh, their silence, or their text delay as rejection? Where could you soften, pause, and assume care instead of criticism? What could change in your relationship if you lean towards trust instead of suspicion? Then ask yourself, am I listening to reply or listening to understand? So when your partner talks, are you present? Are you building your counterattack in your head? Notice your inner monologue. Notice if you're actually hearing words or just waiting for your turn to speak. Then, this is a big question. What ghosts am I hearing through my partner's voice? This one's deeper. So when you snap, when you feel misunderstood, whose echo are you really reacting to? Is it your father? Is it your mother? Is it that horrible teacher from second class who embarrassed you in school? Start separating your partner from your past, otherwise they'll be paying off debts they never owed. Then this one. This is really big. How do I repair after a misfire? Do you dig your heels in? Do you double down? Do you make them apologize for your misunderstanding? Or can you take ownership? Can you, when you recognize it, go to them and say, I am so sorry. I got that so wrong. I was out of line. What stops you from doing repair? Is it pride, fear, habit? Now, here's the challenge. Pick one of these and bring it into your next real conversation. Not all 5, that would be kind of overwhelming, just one, because love isn't changed by big theory dumps. It's changed in the micro moments. One pause, one clarification, one repair. That's how trust rebuilds. And if you want a bonus practice, sit down with your partner and ask them, what's one thing you wish I heard you say more clearly? And then shut up and listen. So don't defend, don't explain, just hear them, because you might be amazed at what comes out. When there's space, everything clears and you can just be present with one another. Because here's the bottom line. Your relationship doesn't get better when you talk more. It gets better when you listen better. Love rarely dies in one cataclysmic explosion. Most of the time it dies in silence, in the places where you stop hearing each other. It dies when you twist neutral words into insults. It dies when you assume the worst instead of checking for the best. It dies when the voice of the person you love becomes drowned out by the ghosts of everyone who's ever hurt you. And that's the tragedy, because the person in front of you, the one you chose, the one you share your life with, they're not your enemy. They're not your critic. They're not your mother, your father, your ex. They're just a human being. Flawed, doing their best, tired, sometimes cranky, who also wants to desperately be understood. If you can see all that, if you can pause before you project, If you can check instead of assuming, your relationship will change, safety will grow, connection will come back, affection will soften the edges, even desire will return. Because when you're not on permanent defense, your body remembers how to open. This is not glamorous work, it's not grand gestures, it's not Instagrammable moments to photograph. It's the quiet daily choice to give each other the benefit of the doubt, to act in good faith, to clarify before you condemn, to listen with the intention to understand, and leave behind the urge to win and score points. Do that enough times, and you'll wake up one day and realize the person beside you isn't your adversary. They're your best friend, they're your ally. The war will be over because you finally stopped fighting shadows. And here's the deepest truth. Love doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be precise. To strip away the distortions and hear what's actually being said. Because when you truly hear each other, intimacy isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Most couples don't break up because of betrayal, they break up because they stopped hearing each other. Remember, love does not end in silence, it ends in distortion. When you keep mishearing the very person who's right in front of you over and over and over again, stop fighting with your projections. Start listening to your partner. The death of love isn't distance, it's mishearing. You don't lose love overnight, you lose it over one tiny misunderstanding piled upon another and another and another. Your partner isn't the enemy, not listening is. So clarify, check, and clarify again. If this episode landed for you, share it with a friend, or maybe with someone you want to love better. These are the conversations that keep relationships alive. I'm Annie, and wherever you are, have a really great day.